That's good. Gente.
Gente.
Oh. Ooh. And we don't know anything about Grinnell. So you can't participate. You don't know anything, honey. Come
on. 3 people watching. Ah, ok. O pessoal já tá assistindo. Foi mal, galera. O meu computador travou. E aí eu caí com a conta da Brasa e acabou a videochamada. Eu peço desculpas. Então acho que eu vou pedir pro John começar de novo da apresentação de Grinnell. And that's it. First of all, I would like to thank John to having me over in his house and like spending a lot of time with us and the Brazilians. And that's it. On behalf of Brasa, thank you so much, John. So
Certainly.
I think now we can like move on. Sorry
sure.
for that.
So I think, I don't know when we got cut off, but I'll assume that the 3 people watching were the 3 people from earlier. So I think we were talking about how Grinnell is different even among liberal arts colleges in that we have an open curriculum. And this is sort of the opposite of most other colleges and universities systems around the country, around the world, where you're able to do just something very specific at the undergraduate level and do that only. So College of Business or College of Engineering, College of Medicine, you get a chance to sort of start over if you've been tracked in your high school system when you come to a place like Grinnell. And a lot of people enjoy that. They find some solace in that maybe they weren't sure that they wanted to do a particular career and they want some time to explore. And that's what liberal arts colleges offer. And Grinnell in particular has 38 different majors and concentrations, and they take up about 1/3 of your coursework over 4 years. That is a major area. So you do become sort of an expert in 1 or even 2 particular fields. There's a lot of students that double major at Grinnell. So you will come out of the 4-year experience with an expertise in 1 or 2 different major areas, we call them. And you'll probably have also had a lot of experience working in those fields, because we try to involve internships and research and other experiential learning opportunities to help students build a professional resume while they're also building their academic resume in the 4 years that they're with us. So the open curriculum is unique about Grinnell. There's only about 25 schools in the country, including Brown, Hamilton, Vassar, a few others that offer this type of open curriculum. The other thing that's unique about Grinnell is that we have a very large financial endowment. This is one of the ways that schools are measured. And ours is in the top 10 per student in the country. We have about a $2 billion endowment. And in the Midwest, culturally, we don't talk about money so much. It's something that you just don't mention. I'm mentioning it here just because it does affect the experience that our students can have. And that's because we'll have resources available to students and student groups, a student or a student group with a good idea or with a purpose or with something that Grinnell can get behind will receive funding to go and achieve whatever it is that they want to do. And so that's something that you don't find at a lot of other smaller schools and less well-endowed schools, because there's limited resources and there's a lot of people that will compete for those resources. And at Grinnell, things can happen much quicker because of the endowment and because of the way that we view our endowment, which is to spend it on students and their own experiences, give them and empower them with resources to be able to do what it is that they're committed to. And so you'll find about 150 different student organizations on campus, and they're pretty well funded compared to their counterparts at other schools, so they can make donations, they can take trips. Like just recently, Raphael and his brother and some friends were down in Tennessee over our 1 week fall break, doing some extreme sports, right?
Yeah, we were hiking and camping.
Oh, well, hiking's not that extreme, but still, the name of the club is Extreme Sports. I'm sure you do parachuting and stuff later. But anyway, so lots of funding for groups and organizations. Certainly, that means a lot of funding for students on the front end of the experience. So, in other words, financial aid and scholarships. Grinnell has a $60 million annual financial aid budget. And so we're committed to meeting the full need of any student that we admit. And this means basically that you fill out what's called the CSS profile if you apply to Grinnell. Once you do that, that gives us the information we need. If we decide to admit you, and we admit about 10% of the international students, it's highly selective, of course, but if you're admitted, you will have 100% of your need met by grant and or scholarships, so that you don't have to worry about how you're going to pay for it. It's a very high price tag at an elite school. I think I may have mentioned before we cut out that Grinnell ranks number 11 in the country in terms of liberal arts and sciences colleges, reputation, and those kinds of things. So it's very selective, but it's also very generous when students are admitted. So we have students getting usually about a $38,000 average annual award from Grinnell. So that's a lot of support on the front end, and we continue to invest in students throughout their 4 years with that money. So things like taking an unpaid internship, lots of top internships on the coasts over the summer where our students will work for 8 to 10 weeks, may not pay anything or may be very underpaid. And you may live in high rent districts to be able to do those internships, like in the IT sector in Sunnyvale, California, or up in Seattle, or San Francisco area. You might work in investment banking in New York. Manhattan's very expensive. So if you need help being able to take these opportunities to do internships, the college can help you by doing internship funding, which for I don't know the number of students, but the total amount spent last summer was over $400,000 in $2,000 to $5,000 increments for students to be able to take a plane to New York, buy bus fare or train fare, sublet an apartment, those kinds of things, so that they could have a great experience and not have to worry too much about the financing of that if it was underpaid or unpaid. So that's a big difference about Grinnell. The other thing I'll say that's very different about Grinnell, well, not too different from many other colleges, but we're in a rural setting and we're in a small town. And again, like I said earlier, if it hadn't cut out, it's sort of counterintuitive. You think big city, more opportunity, more diversity, all of that. But what happens if you go to these big city schools, you might realize that, well, how well am I getting to know these students? I see them, but we just cross paths. We don't hang out. We don't have the opportunity to spend much time together because I'm heading across town to get to my apartment or to get to my job. It's a different sort of pace and lifestyle in those bigger schools and bigger cities. So in fact, in Grinnell, I think there's a more daily and a more active experience of the diversity that we offer. And that is, in terms of the diversity, about 20% of our students coming from outside of the US. In other words, non-US citizens. If you're interested in getting to know the world, you can come to small town Iowa and actually have that happen every day. You see the same people every day in different circles. in different capacities. If you're on a sports team or in a play or on student government or in classes or on dorm halls with folks, you will see them and have to interact with them every day, like it or not. We're in a town of 9,000 people in Grinnell. The school is only 1,700 undergraduates. And so you're sort of forced to learn how to deal with diversity, how to appreciate it, and how to work successfully with students coming from different backgrounds. And so this is something that our alumni tell us is a very important skill, and one that they didn't necessarily expect when they came to Grinnell. But in fact, as they go out into their professions and they do jobs at multinational organizations and teams that are constantly changing and that may have different constituents coming, they're able to be comfortable and successful working with other people from all over the world and all over different kinds of backgrounds. That's part of what you go away to school to do. Of course, you're going to learn academics, you're going to learn your subjects, you're going to learn from your professors. But if you're at a residential college where everyone's living together as well as studying together, there's a whole nother aspect of learning, which is personal and social, that can happen. Again, you're only 18 to 22. You're still learning what's important to you, how you're going to work with other people, where you stand on things politically and socially. And so having some people around you that will challenge you to help you figure that out in I think what's a pretty comfortable environment. There's not a lot of pretense at Grinnell. It's very egalitarian. Everything is free on campus. It's a different sort of a thing that you might not, and your parents might not think about as a benefit. But I definitely think it's something that our students tell us they were glad about having, because the lifestyle at Grinnell and the people here make you a different person, because you have to, in Brazil, you're probably going to school with all Brazilians, for example. Granted, there's different individuals and different personalities and all that, but by and large, perhaps most of the people you're studying with have a similar worldview and experience. All of that can be challenged a bit in good ways, and you can also have the opportunity to provide other students with the knowledge of your country and culture. And so there's a lot of this sharing that happens that is good overall, but also has professional benefits if you're going to go into sort of an international type of field like IT, like business, like government or diplomacy, that kind of thing. So Grinnell is a training ground for that, and it's indirect as well as being direct. You can join MUN, all the United Nations. You get a trip to Chicago or to New York and DC every year to compete nationally. That's very specific and very formal. But you'll also maybe have a student from Tokyo as your roommate, or a student in class who's from Zimbabwe. You've never met a student from Zimbabwe. So little things like that will add up over 4 years and help you grow in ways that you won't have expected, I think. We can probably talk about specific majors and areas of study if that's of interest. What do you have to say about what I've been saying? I mean,
no, I agree with everything Jen said.
Okay.
I can later share my experience with you, but I've been doing trips during breaks, to different national parks. As I said, everything funded by Grinnell. I've met a lot of international students from all over the world, stuff like that. I have some questions to ask you, if you don't mind. And then they are also asking some other questions, and then I'll read them after.
Yep.
But I'd like to ask you, what do you see as the main, the most valuable point of having a liberal arts education instead of like a big college education?
Okay, well, people that hire students in the U.S. like liberal arts graduates because typically they are more well-rounded and they're more visionary. So they haven't, like they would if they'd gone to just a university and studied a very specific course of study. They are not simply like a worker bee type of person. Like this is what I can do, and it's limited to this or that task or specialty. So liberal arts folks usually have got a broader vision. They've done lots of different things that are related. And so I'll give you an example. You could go to a university and go study in the business school, and you'll learn whatever they think is important about studying business and being good at business. But they won't have a theater department. They probably won't have psychology department and classes in psychology. And I'll tell you that if you're going to work in business, you should take an acting class, right? You're going to have to sell people your idea, especially if you're an entrepreneur. But also if you're in corporate stuff or you're negotiating, you're going to have to be comfortable in front of people. You're going to have to know how to learn your lines, what your talking points are. You're going to have to be persuasive, and you're going to have to hit your mark, just like an actor does, and deliver in a short amount of time something that will persuade people to either invest in your business or continue to give you money to do whatever it is you're doing. So that skill is important. If you're also in business, understanding psychology and the way people make decisions. How do people part with their money? How do you negotiate business deals? What are the personalities involved? How do you use that in advertising? All of that kind of thing. You also have to know how to interpret data. So statistics and finite math and things like that, you should be studying so that you don't rely on only accountants to tell you whether or not something is feasible when you're trying to make decisions in business. You want to be able to look at what they're doing and say, yeah, that makes sense. So there's all kinds of other things that go into many other fields. A lot of them relate to people skills. So if you go to university, you're not interacting maybe with as many people because there's 300 or 400 people in your class. There's not a discussion basis that you feed off of every day, where you learn how to listen, you learn how to ask good questions, you learn how to speak persuasively about your opinion. If you're not doing that every day in class, rather at a university, you're sitting in a large lecture hall just absorbing material like a sponge, that's not the same kind of learning as what we offer at liberal arts. So that's my long answer.
Yeah, you talked about like big classes and small classes. From my experience here, I've only had like small classes. How would you describe the class environment in Grinnell, and why do you think it's so important to have like smaller classes during your graduation?
Well, you're probably better to talk about that. I mean, I went to a liberal arts college as well, and I think it does. It's training ground. It's being challenged every day in different ways. And sorry, and you can't jump up that high. It's doing being right face to face with people rather than being able to hide behind a book or a professor's lecture. You're able to participate. And that's not always easy. And especially if you're coming from these more rote learning systems where you're just supposed to learn the answers that somebody else figured out, and spit them back out at the end of the term on a test. It's very different in the liberal arts, and it's more creative, and there's more room for your own opinion and thought process. So it makes you, I think it makes you in the end become a more critical person, and being a critical person is valuable in any field that you go into. And I'll just say it again, because I think this is what's the big difference is. When you go to university in almost any other country, you're training to get a particular credential for a particular job. Like you're going to go to be a lawyer. You know, it's you have to just know that already when you're 18, usually, and a lot of kids don't know that yet. And you even if you do that, and if you do think you know you want to be a lawyer, you're going to learn how to be the lawyer that they want you to be. You know, you're not going to be your own type of lawyer or businessman or engineer or whatever it is. You're going to be what they have prescribed in general. And I'm just generalizing for effect here, but yeah, that's a big difference.
Okay, I have another question about like social justice. We talk about a lot about it on campus, and people say like Grinnell is really into social justice. I'd like you just to tell them like what do we see by social justice, and what do we expect from students?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I should get rid of my dog here. You say what you think self-gov means.
Ok, yeah. Galera, é muito interessante aqui em Grinnell, foi tipo, quando eu cheguei, foi choque para mim. Eu vou voltar para o inglês. Because we have something here that we call self-gov. So we say students are supposed to govern themselves. We don't have like really strict norms. Students, they're just supposed like to behave like as a group. And it's like the famous bom senso in Portuguese. So there's gonna be no one like punishing you all the time and with like rules and stuff. Like even people who work in like residence halls and like to build communities and everything, they're not gonna be there like just to feed you. They're gonna be there like to build a community and to help you. So everything here is based in like self-gov. People say like Grinnell, like the administration, the college doesn't need you to like impose a rule. Students can like govern themselves and make the community as the way they want it to be. So that's really interesting for me, and that was really something that stood out when I got here.
Yeah, the idea behind it is that we kind of say, well, you know, if students are smart enough to get into Grinnell, they're probably smart enough to make their own decisions for themselves. And so we treat them like adults. And when we do that, they tend to behave like adults. And it's again, another opportunity for you to learn and grow socially and personally, as well as academically and intellectually. So giving students that freedom to fail as well as to succeed. Sometimes students won't make a great choice, but maybe they'll learn more effectively how to make a better choice the next time if they haven't been, punished or kind of beaten down for making a wrong choice every now and then. So that's sort of what self-gov is about. It also means that students understand that they're part of a community and that they need to behave accordingly. They need to be responsible citizens. They need to be active bystanders. If they see things that are not right, they need to speak up. So learning how to do that, again, is another important social skill. It's something that maybe doesn't always happen in the real world, but we don't think it's a bad thing to make our students think about it, and that it's a good standard to go out into the real world and try to be someone who's going to be a good member of a community and be able to promote social justice and things like that. for Grinnell, we celebrate that in many ways. A lot of it has to do with the diversity and the access policies that we have in admissions, and with our packaging policy. So we try to make Grinnell affordable for everyone, no matter where they're coming from. We also honor people that do social justice. We have the Grinnell Social Justice Prize every year, where we give a monetary award to one or two social justice sort of entrepreneurs anywhere in the world that I think are under 30 or under 40 or something like that. Young entrepreneurs in social justice receive the Grinnell Prize. And so we put some of our money behind supporting people that are leading in those areas. And then you'll see a lot of student organizations that are organized around political and social justice issues. So a lot of LGBTQ organizations. We have a Stonewall Coalition, which is part of a national organization that we have a charter to here on campus. There are political organizations and things like Amnesty International and other things that might be part of a student's experience here, is learning how to advocate for issues that are important to them.
It's like going to like their questions. So going a little bit more about admissions and the questions everyone wants to ask you.
Right.
So could you just tell us about like an essay that stood out to you, or some like what you expect to see in essays, and like if you have any tips for them who are like applying right now?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of things to say about essays, and you should be most excited about the essay part of the application. So why is that? It's because it's the last thing that you have any control over. Ostensibly, you took the exams, that is the ACT or the SAT. You know, those scores, they are what they are. You can't change them. You can't tell your teachers what to write about you in your in their recommendation letters. Your grades are what they are. You know, they're sort of in the bag. And so the last thing that you can control is your voice to the readers of your application, which at Grinnell will be at least two people. One of them will be me, either the first or the second reader. And then you'll be presented to a committee. So these highly selective liberal arts colleges have a sort of a democratic vote. And it's my job as the international person to present international students for admission to the committee. So I make a short list of people I want to admit. We go to the committee and I present them and try to get a majority of my colleagues' hands to go up to verify admission. So we'll read excerpts of really good essays or really bad ones or really weird ones. So sometimes you'll have a student with a great score, good grades in their country, good recommendations, and they'll write, you know, a very strange, esoteric essay, you know, something we can't get our heads around. In other cases, there'll be, you know, more of an average student, but who writes a great essay where their personality just kind of leaps off the page, and we're already starting to picture that student on campus because the essay is so good. So the thing I would say about content of essays, the Common App gives you like 6 or 7 prompts. There's always the one that was just, you know, just a topic of your choice. I usually like that one a lot. You do have to think small when you're doing your essay. Don't tell us how you're going to save the world, or don't tell us a common essay is about, you know, my grandmother that survived World War II, and these are all the things that she's done. By the end of the essay, I'm like, wow, I would love to admit this grandmother, but she's not the applicant. It's this student. So there's some tricky themes. If you try to write about, you know, I suspect this year from our domestic students, we'll get a lot of essays about the Judge Kavanaugh hearings and the hot topic of the day politically or socially. Some of those topics are just too big to say anything new or original about. So usually what I like to see from students is a small moment or incident or object or tradition or something that they can tell me about that makes up who they are. I'm not going to remember Raphael's essay, but
you don't need to. It doesn't matter.
But it is. So one student wrote about. It's very important to have the first 2 or 3 lines be interesting and captivating, right? So this one student wrote about how the greatest lessons she learned in life were from a washing machine. And she kind of let that sit. And then she went into her essay about how, her parents had divorced, unfortunately. And she was living with her mom in a very small efficiency apartment that happened to have a laundry room, which was rare. And a lot of people on that floor wanted to do their laundry there. Her room was the laundry room. And she talked about how she decorated it and some of her favorite books and how she was trying to make the most out of, this unfortunate situation and how, the time was measured in laundry cycles and how her mom met people who, wanted their laundry done and how they made friends and, all this kind of stuff. And she even mimicked like the sound of the washing machine, ka-thunk, 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 whatever it was. And so a real little kernel of something that she was able to extrapolate on and to go deeper with is really interesting. It always makes it more interesting for me to learn something in an essay. So because I read so many international essays, I'll often learn about, traditions, or there was an essay from India that I read last year that basically opened up like, as I walked out of the numerologist's office, I didn't know what was going to happen. Like, I don't know what a numerologist does. We don't really have them here in the States, or at least in Iowa. But I found out through the essay that this Indian family, per tradition, was having a son sort of late in life, and this brother was already 15, and they went to a numerologist who said you should change your older son's name to a different name so that you can name your other son this name, whatever. I didn't quite follow that. But what he did with the essay was to say, okay, my name got changed when I was like 15. So am I a different person? What's my identity? And so he kind of talked about how he used that opportunity to try to do different things that he wouldn't have done as his old self under his old name and that kind of thing. So again, that's a tiny little thing, but they make for interesting essays and kind of an original voice. So I would just say, really think about it. The other thing to do is make sure you give it to some people to read, make several drafts. It's hard to edit yourself sometimes, but it's important to make drafts. Don't let your parents be one of the people to read it because they're too close to you. They'll either have too much to say or they'll just say, oh, it's great, when it might not be quite ready. Whoever you ask to read it, just ask them one question. Say, could anyone else that you know have written this? And if the answer is nope, this is all you, then you're done. If they say, well, you wrote about the MUN thing that you won, and our buddy was also on the MUN team, and he might be able to write the same essay because he was on the team that won too. Then you might have to go back and look at it, try to figure out what it is that will make it unique to you. It's kind of a lofty goal, but it's worth shooting for anyway while you're writing these things.
Okay, another question about admissions is about scores.
Mm.
Whether Grinnell accepts self-reported scores.
Yep.
And like some basic, I don't know, how do you look at scores?
Well, we look at them sort of in a secondary, as a secondary academic credential because we do make you take tests at Grinnell, but they're nothing like the SAT or the ACT or the TOEFL. And we talk about 4 years versus 4 hours, right? It takes 4 hours to take these standardized tests usually, but you have 4 years of high school to show for your academic work ethic. So day in and day out, are you turning stuff in? Are you doing well? Do your teachers, see you in class? All of that. And so for us, that's the bigger indicator of success at a rigorous place like Grinnell is your transcript, your grades, national test exams to some extent. And then the SATs and ACTs can sort of corroborate a bit of that, although we know that for non-native English speakers, they're particularly problematic, particularly the English section of the SAT. ACT is probably a better test for international students, in part because it measures some science skills, and usually most places in the world do science education at the high school level quite well. So that gives you a benefit if you've also done well in those areas. Not everybody does, so that's fine. But yeah, the TOEFL is a little bit different. IELTS, Duolingo, those things, they're a little bit more important in some ways because at Grinnell and other top liberal arts schools, we don't have ESL as a foreign language option or as a remedial option. And so you're expected to get into these small, very discussion-oriented classes with native English speakers who might have been taught by ex-Harvard professors at some Boston boarding school, and you're supposed to get into these classes right away and be able to contribute and read a lot. Reading is always what surprises international students the most, I think, how much you have to read. But then also how much you have to write about what it is that you're reading and talk about it in class. So we have to know, and we can do this through TOEFL and some other things, that you're able to hit the ground running with your English capacity. Everybody will grow a lot and will have some room to grow usually, but we need to be pretty assured that you're real competent in English in all of its forms. So,
and what about self-reported scores?
We can take those, particularly with the TOEFL, because we can verify TOEFL, and if it costs some money to send that, you can't afford it, you can just send that to the international admission at grinnell.edu web address, and Aru, who's my student worker from India, will upload that to your file. My assistant Melinda will call TOEFL and verify the score. SAT and ACT we can't verify it in the same way as we can TOEFL. So it is important to at least have that, if not coming directly from the test organization, have it come on your high school transcript or in the counselor recommendation section of the Common App. We would accept that as official if it's coming from a teacher or headmaster or a school counselor who's saying these are your test scores.
Nice. Another question is, how do you look at transcripts, GPA, or class rank from schools that have different grading systems and course systems?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and so I do have familiarity with other systems, and I can, pretty well tell who's doing well within a particular system. We can also often tell by ranking, if that's offered by the school, how you're doing relative to your peers in a particular, national or private curriculum. yeah, that's pretty much it. If I have questions, I'll contact the counselor or the EduSA person, who can sometimes give us a larger perspective on grading in particular countries and at particular schools. And I know that even from year to year in particular countries that the grading is harder. For example, in class 11 in India, because they're trying to scare people into studying extra hard for the class 12 exams, where they do quite well and for which schools get judged. So we're pretty comfortable with that. Usually a good school counselor in their recommendation information will also give us sort of a context of where their school ranks within the school systems in the country, and then where you would sort of be placed among your peers at that school. So yeah, that's what I would say about that, I guess.
Okay, and then coming back like to Grinnell and academics, some people asking about some questions about STEM.
Mhm.
So they're asking about like opportunities of research on campus. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, the Grinnell faculty, because of our reputation academically, is successful in writing grants, research grants, that is, to receive money to do multi-year research projects that, because we're an undergraduate school only, and we don't have graduate students that would usually get those opportunities if you were to go to university. They rely on our undergraduates to do the research for that particular project. So one of my friends who's a biochemist has a multi-year grant to research ways to help people quit smoking by analyzing the nicotine inhibitors that occur naturally in the brain chemistry. He pays students, from the grant, $3,000 some dollars to work for 6 weeks on campus, 8 hours a day, in the labs, learning how to do research, learning how to write it up, how to share it, how to share it with people that are not scientists, which is a big skill to have. And then usually to present the updates on their findings at a national academic conference, where there's usually going to be graduate school people that you might be applying to or wanting to apply to for master's programs that will be there, and whom you'll be able to talk to and talk very specifically about research that you've done at Grinnell that will have a bearing on your attractiveness to those programs as an applicant. So that's not uncommon at all. The STEM extension, if it continues, is something that students in the STEM fields can benefit from, so that you can remain on your student F1 student visa and continue to work a bit longer in optional practical training within those fields, provided that we don't change that under our current administration.
Yeah. Also, like we have a lot of what we call maps in Grinnell. So they're like also research programs with a professor, either during the semester and then you get credits for it, or during summer or winter break, and then you also get credits for it. A lot of my friends are doing that.
You can also get paid if you do it in the summer. You get a $3,400 research stipend from Grinnell. So if you're a biologist and you want to study Amazon River water and compare it to the Iowa River water, that probably costs some money in customs to import Brazilian, river water. You can use that money to pay for that, or to buy a computer program that you might need in your research, or a video camera, or go to a conference and interview people, buy a plane ticket to go there. So there's lots of ways that money can help you actually contribute new scholarship to a field.
Also, there is someone asking if they have like any specific questions about a department. Should they contact the department or should they contact admissions?
It might depend on the department, but
physics in this case.
Yeah, so for physics, Charles Cunningham may be the current chair, and I think he's quite good at responding. But I think it's not a bad idea to copy me, so that I know you've reached out to a faculty member, and if you don't hear back from them, they have busy schedules and they're sometimes cyclical. We've just come back from fall break, so now actually might not be a bad time to reach out to folks on faculty. But I don't think they put their emails up there if they don't want to hear from people. They would hide their emails otherwise. So it's not a bad idea to reach out to them and just copy me. It's edwardsj@grinnell.edu, and then I can sort of follow up with them or be in on the thread so I know that contact was made and that you got an answer. Because if you don't get an answer after a week or two, you can always reach out to me.
Okay. Another question is, what do Grinnell students usually do after graduating?
Well, usually about 50 to 60% go into the job market in the States or elsewhere. Usually 30 to 40%, sometimes depends a bit on the job market and the availability. But a lot of students go on to graduate study at big state schools or Ivy League schools to continue work in their fields. And 5 to 8% will do sort of gap year or postgraduate fellowships or work experience or other things like Teach for America or the Peace Corps, these kinds of things where they might go for a year or two to live somewhere in the world and do service or that kind of thing. Usually as a experience before they go back to graduate school. So Grinnell rates 7th in the nation for PhD productivity. That means that most students, Grinnell isn't the last place that they go to school. Within 5 years, usually 60% of our students have earned or are working on earning a master's degree, for example. And so a lot of students, they get the academics, they get the intellectual curiosity and passion for the subject, and the work ethic, of course, and the ability to do that work such that they want to go on to further higher study, and often do so.
Nice. Another question is whether Grinnell accept Duolingo as the English exit.
Okay, well, I just met with a Duolingo person, Jennifer, in India last week in Jaipur. We're going to have a meeting to talk about if we'll accept that. Several of my good friends in admissions are now working for Duolingo, so I expect that I'll be in Vienna next week at a conference, and I expect that they'll also want to tell me about Duolingo. So I will definitely look into that on behalf of the college. It seems so far to be something that other schools are adopting and offering as an alternative. And so, Grinnell may be on the horizon for that as well. At the moment, we're not technically. Are we still on? Yes.
A gente caiu de novo, mas voltei. So, yeah, he was saying that they're discussing the possibility, but probably that's a future plan, right?
Yeah. Duolingo could be on the horizon.
Okay, so
I'm glad to hear people are interested in it. That means it's legit.
Yeah, nice. I have another question for you. Is how would you describe like the life of an international student coming to Grinnell? Some students are afraid to come like to Iowa. What are the resources on campus for them and like that kind of stuff?
Oh man, you could answer that better than I could. Um, I mean, I've been doing this a long time. My wife happens to also be the Dean for International Student Affairs, and we worked in our capacities together for 20 years. Um, I mean, the type of people that end up at Grinnell aren't that worried about the fact that it's a small town. I know some people can't imagine anything else, and it maybe stereotype that, which is different, right? But I think you have to put it in perspective. And I know it's hard when you're 18. 4 years sounds like such a long time, but I'm 52, and believe me, 4 years is not that long. Most of our students, they spend their summers in cities. They spend their breaks in cities, either back home or doing internships. If you graduate from Grinnell and you'll go back and start your career in a city, maybe. I would just challenge you to think beyond that. I don't know what the statistics are. I should probably know, but probably half the world doesn't live in a city. And why not understand what that's like? Also, while you're in a really challenging and rigorous academic environment, it means there are fewer distractions. You're able to concentrate not on getting around the city to all your classes and finding an apartment and finding a roommate to help pay for the apartment and cleaning and going grocery shopping and cooking for yourself, doing all this stuff that you'd have to do if you went to a big city university. Everything's kind of taken care of here. The pace is slower. People can concentrate on relationships, on friendships, on extracurricular stuff that they had to give up at their city high schools because things got so busy. And so think of it as an opportunity to concentrate on what you're, investing a lot of time and money into, which is a top-notch, world-class liberal arts education with fewer distractions and the possibility for more and deeper relationships that might end up being business relationships or, just friendships. Either is very valuable. And so seeing people every day, again, it's not always easy. People have good days, they have bad days. But seeing people every day from all over the world, all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds, bumping into them, getting to know them, having to deal with them, in other words, is really valuable in terms of your growth as a person. And what you're going to be comfortable with later in life and be successful within. So that's where this kind of stuff happens. We don't have a Starbucks. We don't have a 20-plex movie theater. We don't have a club scene, right? But we have students from New York, LA, San Francisco, Austin, Tokyo, Mumbai, Sao Paulo. Everybody's in it together, and people make their own fun, which is a lot of fun in and of itself.
Yeah.
But don't get me wrong, you're studying a lot. So if you're not interested in really diving in with your studies, then Grinnell's not going to be a good fit for you.
Yeah, about fit, people ask, what's the profile of a Grinnell student, of a Grinnellian?
Well, I mean, in terms of the numbers, average SAT score is about a 1450. Average TOEFL is about 106, 107 for internationals. Average ACT is about a 32. That's just the numbers. But because I have lots of applications and I'm only looking for a small number of people, I look at personality, I look at essays, I look at what teachers have to say. If you're curious, if you don't worry about pretense of cities or coasts or this name school or that name school, then you're going to fit in, because people really don't care where you're from or what you wear. They care about who you are and what you think. And that's kind of liberating for a lot of people, especially if you're coming from very sort of hierarchical social circles, right? And so I guess people that come to Grinnell, that end up at Grinnell, are not very hung up about stuff like that, which I think is refreshing. Oh, are you going to stretch for that?
Yeah.
Otherwise you can go into this. Right there. Are we still on?
Yes.
Okay.
If it's on there, we're on. So, John.
This is what we eat for dinner in Iowa.
John, I think they don't have any other questions. I would like to thank you so much. I would open this opportunity if you have anything else to say to them. Like to do.
Go see our good friend Desiree Damada de Santos. If she's still working at USA in Sao Paulo, I hope so. I will also tell you the story of a Brazilian that I recruited from Campinas, who, during our IPOP orientation, met a woman from Bulgaria. IPOP's the first week of classes. Met this girl. They dated all 4 years. We're out. Oh, that's okay. It was going to be my story of how they ended up getting married.
Really? When was it?
I was their official at their wedding at Brown.
How long ago was it?
2 summers ago.
Oh, really?
They had finished their master's programs at Brown. They both got into Brown. And they were going to get married, and they called me and said, we never would have met if you wouldn't have admitted us. And so we want you to be the official at our wedding. So Karen and I went out to Rhode Island.
Sorry, guys, we're back again. My computer just died again. Sorry.
Okay. So this is the last thing I was going to leave you with, which is just, not that this is going to happen to everybody, or your brother, but so my great story about Brazil was a student who I admitted from Campinas, Brazil, who came the same year as, along with his other classmates, as a girl from Bulgaria. They met the very first week, because we have an international pre-orientation program. And they were hanging out together. I was mowing my lawn one weekend right across the street from campus, and they both rode bikes together, passing my house, laughing and giggling and stuff. It's like, okay, great. And they were together all 4 years. They both got into PhD track programs at Brown University, which you probably heard of. And then after 2 years at Brown, they completed their master's program. They decided to get married, and they called me and asked me to be the official at their wedding to effectively marry them. And they said, well, we never would have met if you hadn't admitted us and brought us to Grinnell. So we want you to do it. And so professionally, it was a great sort of full circle opportunity for me to have another impact in their lives, which was great. Doesn't happen for everybody. But that's my great Brazil professional triumph, I think, in many ways. So,
okay, so before we end, there's a new question that's for me. How is the typical Saturday night at Grinnell? I mean, we are in a really, really small town, but I think the college knows that. So we have a lot of events, a lot of like concerts, movie screening on the theater. We have a lot of groups. So we have like theater groups, singing groups, like a cappella groups. So we have a lot of parties. So every night, not only Saturday nights, if you want to do something, you can do something fun. You can do something nice. That's it. We have like two main party locations on campus, but we also have like a lot of parties off campus. That's what I want to know. Like, some people don't want to party; they just keep on their room studying. Like that's fine too. But usually Saturday nights are kind of busy, and you can make your own Saturday night. I mean, anyone to have their own experience, and each experience is unique. So yeah, I would say that.
And the big dance, because I live across the street from the Harris Center where the parties are, is disco. So Grinnellians love to dress up.
That's
and
true.
So they will spend a week or two making a costume, which is like a 70s disco costume, or the Mary B. Jane, where it's a cross-dressing party, or they do
Halloween
underwear ball. They do chains, or you're chained to somebody all night. Do they still do that?
I don't remember that.
Okay. Well, chains was a party where you got chained to a random person and then you got to know them throughout the night. Yeah, all kinds of stuff like that. And then yeah, you can go to Iowa City, to Des Moines, restaurants, concerts, sporting events, all of that. Only an hour away. So Chicago is 4 hours by car, 5 hours by bus. So the bus stops right in front of the student center. So you can be in Chicago in 5 hours. Most people know somebody from Chicago because we have a lot of students from Chicago area that you can crash with or hang out with while you're there. A lot of students were in Chicago this winter break, I think, or this fall break. And I lived in Chicago for most of my 20s. It's a great city. So.
Okay, some people are saying that they are at Love Grinnell.
Okay, good. Well, apply because you will be in a small group of Brazil. We're trying to get more Brazilians, but you'll be in a small group of Brazilian applicants that we will be very interested in reading. So
yeah, thank you so much, John, again, to have me in your house late at night. So thank you so much. Thank you guys for coming and watching. If you have any other questions, you can email me, or I'll also email you John's email so you can have his contact. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to message me. Like real, I want to see you all here next year. So yeah.
Obrigado.
Valeu, gente. Até mais.